Well, welcome everyone. I know we got some folks jumping in and watching us here. We are live on Facebook. I'm excited to say we are live with the amazing, talented Dan Swinscoe. Dan, how are you?
Hey, good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So as you guys know, tonight, Dan and I are going to be talking about regressions of exercise, regressions. So regressions are one of those things that I don't think that word is ever mentioned in chiropractic college. Dan, I don't know if it's mentioned in physical therapy school, but nobody ever talks about it. And you get out and it's like, dude, you need these all the time. Yeah. Did you ever hear the word in school?
No, the amount of preparation I was given to really problem solve people's movement skills coming out of PT school was just sadly low. You know, it's just one of those things that, like you and I had talked about, that it's nice to be able to share the struggles that we've had to condense it down in a Cliff Notes version to people who haven't been in it for 30 years like we have, and kind of let them learn from our suffering so they can make new mistakes and find some other ones. But you learn a lot through trial and error, and you have really no other way to go if they don't give it to you when you're in school.
I love it. Yeah, I think it's great. And, you know, Dan, you and I have had these conversations, and just for the record, I've only been in this gig for 15 years, my man. So I'm barely on the actuarial table compared to you. You know, I'm at the top of the bell curve. You're all the way right.
I'm a couple of standard deviations over.
That's right. You're like 5 standard deviations out of 4 possible to the right. So yeah. Anyways, so Dan, let's kind of go over this. So let's start out at the beginning here. Let me ask you this. As we're talking about this, I'm sure people will think like, hey, why are you guys even talking about this? Like, is this really even a thing? Is this a problem? Why do you think having a lack of regressions in your exercise is even a problem?
I think it's a problem because nobody bats 1,000, right? So you've got a patient with a problem, whatever it might be. Let's say somebody's got a shoulder pain and you've determined you want to work on their scapula muscles. And so you're having them do some sort of a row, kind of a horizontal pull type of an exercise. And you ask them, where do you feel that? And you kind of point between the shoulder blades because that's where you expect. And instead they point in the front of their shoulder. And this kind of hurts. And you're like, what the blank, that's not supposed to happen.
Yeah.
And then you immediately have to problem solve because that person came to see you for shoulder pain and the exercise you gave them to fix it is actually aggravating it. And you have to think on your feet and know immediately what are some problem solving skills we can have. And to me, regression is just that. It's problem solving. And that's why I find it interesting. And I think it's useful as opposed to, I have a 10-pound weight, we'll try a 5-pound weight, right? I mean, theoretically, you may end up doing that, but that doesn't take any skill. That doesn't take practice. Anybody can do that. And hopefully we can share there's better options out there because it's emotionally painful to have someone seek your care as an expert in a topic and you start doing your thing and now it isn't working.
Yep.
Now what?
I got to share a story. So I came back to the clinic one day. I'd gone to a CrossFit type seminar over the weekend. I come back and this guy comes in, you're saying shoulder pain. He's got shoulder pain. And I determined that the best thing for him is going to be pressing overhead. And because it was a CrossFit thing, it was like barbells are the only heavy thing you're allowed to use. So it was like pressing overhead with a barbell. He holds that barbell and he goes to press. And I mean, if it was at a 45-degree angle in front of him, it would have been perfect. And so I have him standing trying to press overhead. He can't do it. Bar goes out, starts falling forward. And I was like, let me lighten it up, and then let me go even lighter. And the only regression tool I had in my brain was reducing the weight, which you and I both know, reducing weight, speed, and reps is rookie school, right? I mean, it's just absolutely rookie school. So luckily, a couple of years later, I took a course and it was all about having a starting point and then regressing. And it hit me like a ton of bricks in that. The people I'd always heard of, Gray Cook, Greg Rose, Jimmy Ewan, we were talking about, Brett Jones, who's the guy out in Valencia, California, Alan Cosgrove, Eric Cressy, Ben Bruno, all these amazing trainers, coaches, therapists, everything. The commonality was they could regress way better, more so than they were known for like super high end, super difficult 18-part compound exercises.
Yeah.
It's the regressing. It's the regressing. So,
and I think another point that you made without even necessarily trying to make it, that I had to come to after being in practice far too long, was that you named a lot of people who aren't clinicians. And when I was in PT school, the bias was you learn from PTs or MDs. That's it. And I can't tell you the last time super awesome information came to me from people with those letters after their last name. Not to say that it's not valuable, of course, but I think you need to be open to how much amazing information you can get from the personal trainer world, you know, like an Eric Cressy, like a, oh God, I'm blanking on his name, the Canadian guy. He's kind of famous for hip stuff. Oh,
Stu McGill,
no, it'll come
not
to me.
the Cosgroves, Mike Maxwell,
Cosgrove, and all the guys you're talking about, though, they're trainers. And also, like as an example, I've learned so much through kettlebell training, through RKC, HKC, and then eventually Strong First came around and Strong First. And one of your colleagues, Mike Hartle, who's a chiro and a coach and a brilliant man, what is now Strong First Barbell, he had his own version of that he would teach. So we had a one-day kettlebell cert and then a one-day barbell cert. And I'm learning things that are just blowing my mind, that are everyday helpful for me in my training and so many other people, stuff you never heard in PT school. We didn't have a barbell or a kettlebell in PT school. I think all of our dumbbells are probably covered in vinyl, you know, the little fellows. So it was just strength training and understanding the idea of progressions and regressions and even lateralizations, just to make things just a little bit different. That all came to me long after, through just going to and listening and learning from people like you just mentioned.
That should be maybe a new rule. If your weights, if the weight you're using with your client can't hold the door open to your clinic, toss it. You know, those 2-pound neoprene weights are just, they're not worth anything. They're not worth anything. Anyways.
By the way, well, I was trying to remember, I have to give it Dean Somerset.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. He does that really hip and shoulder with Tony Gentlecore.
With Tony,
you know? Yeah, they're both great guys. All right. So we know that's a problem. We know it's a problem. We've both had situations where we completely screwed it up, right? When did you kind of, like, you talked a little bit about it, but when did you get to the point where you're like, hey man, I got to start pursuing this as intentionally pursuing it, not just kind of stumble across some things that people say? Because that was my first experience. Like, people just kind of maybe mention something at a seminar, you know, on the afternoon of the second day. And then, you know, when did you get to that point, and what was the first pursuit of you that you did?
I don't remember how I got to the point, but I think one of my watershed moments, for whatever reason, I decided FMS was new in, year 2000 or something. And I think I went like in 2001, I flew across the country for it. But to tell you how things have evolved, Gray and Lee were the ones that taught it, and it was 2 days. And back then there was no level 2. It was just level, there was only one there was, right? And so I had 2 days learning from those two guys. And it blew my mind in such a great way. And then SFMA came along, and I'm like, yep, I want that. I need to learn that. And then, oh, SFMA has a level 2. Yep, I need to learn that. Oh, FMS has a level 2 now? Going over that. And then you go to TPI and you just keep learning some of the same stuff, but relearning it and getting it better. And really, when I first came across, as an example, like SFMA, I tried to memorize it. And because it was also so new, and I recognized I didn't have it, I wanted to have it, so I tried to memorize it. And now, having gone through it so many times and had the honor of helping teach it, you just have to understand how those flow sheets got there, and you nail it, right? But I think you have to go through some trouble. So for me, I guess it all started back in the day, in around 2001 or something, with FMS.
That's awesome. And I'm sure 2 days of Gray and Lee was like drinking from a fire hose. But I would say that I kind of stumbled on this idea, and people were talking about it. And I can remember getting the, do you remember the Secrets DVD from Brett Jones and
I think I've got them in the drawer right now.
I played them on my old MacBook Pro on a flight, on a Southwest flight, flying to some course or something, and just blew my mind. And I was like, great, unbelievable. Anyways. All right. Well, let's dive in and actually talk about it. For those who are listening, like, regressions are important. The people that we see that are like the way to separate good clinicians from great clinicians, or punk ass chumps from ones that are actually great, is their ability to regress an exercise, right? So do you have an example, or can you give us a thought of an easy way to think about regressions to match your patient's ability? I think, in our live courses, and I'd highly recommend anybody join us for a live course next year, clinic gym hybrid live course. Cody may be instructing, Kurt may be instructing, Dan may be there. We always say that progressions challenge and regressions help them understand, right? We back that exercise down until the client understands what the hell we're trying to do and psychologically gets a little bit of success, because it sucks if every rep you've done has been a failure, right? It's like you're getting corrected on every single rep from your therapist or your chiro because you're doing them crappy. It's not a great experience for that patient, right? So can you give us an example of one that you commonly use or that you see a lot?
The point you made, I think, is really good. Also, when you have an exercise in mind, like say something as simple, we can use it incrementally, as like a step up. What size step are you going to give that person? And so what I used to do is I think for you, it's going to be a 12-inch box. So I get a 12-inch box. But what I've started to do now is if I think it's a 12-inch box, I get a 10. So that I give a fudge factor to make it more likely they're going to be successful. And then if they are successful, I'm like, you know what? I think that's too easy for you. Let's go to the next one. So they're feeling success from the jump. And it's not because I want them to feel success because of any reason other than this needs to be a positive experience. People say PT stands for pain and torture, right? It's so if that's the word on the street, we need people to know that when they come here, they're going to grow, learn, develop, and improve. And just by giving myself a little fudge factor there, the regression kind of starts at the initial spot. So I don't start people where I think they're going to be. I start them at just a hint below that. And then if challenged, perfect. I actually did a better job by giving it a little easier. Yeah. But if they're not challenged and it's easy, I just give them that next one up. So I think a part of it is that, because what you said is so powerful. A definition of fun is doing something you're good at. And so if they're trying to get their life back, and like you said, all you're doing is overcorrecting, or every time you try something, it hurts, then your entry point is the wrong point.
Yeah. And
I think with certain exercises that, like things that you learn from the strength training world, things like that Stu McGill has used in his teachings, is how to teach people to create a little extra tension, how to irradiate some energy. So let's say you gave them an overhead shoulder press because their shoulder hurts. You're like, well, let's see if you can lift overhead, and you give them a weight and it hurts. Well, they might immediately think, well, maybe I need the smaller one. You're like, maybe. What if you make a fist with your other hand really, really tight, and at the same time you think I'm about to punch you in the tummy, and so you're bracing for that punch, you're squeezing with your hand, then do it. Oh, that's better. Well, is the pain gone or is it less? Is less. Oh, well, let's try something else, because all we're doing is finding that proximal stability for distal mobility concept. And maybe you put a band around their knees and have their legs separate a little bit, or maybe you even put a band around their feet and have that rotational piece.
Slow down a little bit, because when you said that you have 30 years of experience, I think you were trying to condense it into about 2 sentences right there. So let's just break this down. No, I think you have great points here, because you're just going through your clinical process of, if early on you said there is no exercise that works for everybody, right? And I'll tell anybody listening or watching this, if anybody ever tells you in a rehab thing, like, oh, I do this for everyone with blank condition, you got to remember there is absolutely no exercise that works for everybody. I promise you that. Okay. And anybody that says I use this on everybody just has a very limited number of exercises. I can't tell you, and I'm sure everybody watching, if you're on, Kurt, I'd ask you, give us a thumbs up. Is there ever been an exercise where it worked for every patient every time you tried it? Or more like you need to have 5, 6, 12 options, because you're going to cycle through them and just go, let me try this, didn't work. Let me try this, didn't work. Let me try this, didn't work. Let me try this. Oh, you know what? That one actually, that reduced the pain. That was pretty cool. Awesome. Kurt, is that your experience more, that no single exercise works for every patient?
Maybe breathing and intra-abdominal pressure. And then everything else, absolutely. It's Russian roulette. So I spent 40 minutes with a patient that one of my other docs was seeing today, just trying to recreate her pain. She's military, rucksacking and running, irritates that we don't have a treadmill, we don't have a rucksack. curtsy squats did it, and then we worked backwards from there, and that's every day.
Love it. Yeah. So a high level exercise is the only thing you can find that excites it. So do you want to start with a high level exercise? Now, Dan, one of the things you said is irradiation, or putting a band around the knees and asking them to push out, or Kurt just talked about intra-abdominal breathing, right? All great. But let's do this. Let's zoom out and show what are the ways you can regress an exercise for people. So let's just say we have an exercise that everybody knows and loves. I'm trying to think of a good one that gets used a lot. I think bird dogs, right? I mean, bird dogs are an exercise. People are like, oh, I start with that all the time. I've had people who are, that's too much, But one thing I want people to know is one way to regress is reduce weight, right? That's kind of the most simplistic thing. And I always say my 9-year-old could tell me to reduce the weight, to reduce the reps, or reduce the speed, right? And so those are ways to do it, but I think there's a lot of other ones. One of which is you can always increase the core activation or irradiate or whatever you want to call that, assist with bracing. And oftentimes that will help. So when you see people doing bird dogs and their lumbar spines just dumping into extension, a regression for them may be irradiating to stabilize their core. So that's one way. Changing the posture. If you think about bird dogs in general, and if you haven't taken an SFMA course, bird dogs are great because you're reducing the posture. So we go from standing to kneeling to quadruped to maybe lying down, right? And the reduction of posture is a way to do it. In our live courses, we do a whole lab about load strategy or load position, right? So if I'm in a bird dog and I'm loading it on one side, will that help? What if you try and load it on the other side? So having the patient push into a weight with their extending arm, or having their other arm brace against something, right? These are all variations on how to change it. So we say load position, posture, increasing assistance, irradiation, core bracing, whatever we want to call that. What are some other ways to regress an exercise?
If we use your bird dog example, I mean, that's a tough one to regress because you already brought them to the ground. But
that's why I used it, because some people feel like that's as regressed as I could be.
Yeah.
And I know that Dan Swinscoe can regress it even further.
Yes.
Dan Swinscoe is such a good therapist. He can palpate the difference between holy water and just plain old spring water. That's how good he is. But go on, Dan.
So like what I would do is get the person barefoot and have their toe that's extending drag on the ground, because they're going to have a little tactile cue through the floor the whole time. It's going to keep their leg low. So if it's going up in the air, that's what's going to hyperextend their spine and dump them, their pelvis, right? Mm-hmm. So I'll have them scuff their toe across the ground. I've got that toe dorsiflexion trigger for core stability. I've got their foot now low down.
Pause real quick. So I would say increasing sensation.
Yeah.
Right. So you're using that toe dragging on the floor on purpose to increase the afferent, if we're talking nerdy, it's increase the afferent information so they have more awareness of they are. Or I've done it where we would call it RNT, but push down on basically their thorax as they do a bird dog. They have to push against it, and it's just awareness, wrapping bands around them, having weights on their back. All that is increasing sensation.
Another way that if you're from a core body, rather than just pushing down on them, you could put a band under them and pull up, right? Because then they're going to have to brace and you're going to get their abs. You could put on their stationary limbs a mini band between the stationary wrist and the stationary knee to create a better connection there. I always have my patient with the hand that's on the ground. I want them to kind of grab the ground like they're palming a basketball and then create a rotational torque. That's going to lock in their lat on that side and get some more proximal stability. So
love it.
Always doing that. I have them make a point of closing their mouth and breathing through their nose to try to get the inflation. So they get a little trigger from that. And then their hand that's in the air, instead of it being a hand, it's a fist. So again, I'm irradiating energy. So the hand that's in the air in front, we're squeezing the hell out of that. The leg in the back, we're leading with the heel, toes dragging on the ground. And then the hand on the ground is irradiating energy and going like that. The natural triggers for your core are your hands, your feet, and your breath. And so I want to encourage high afferent, as you're saying, sensory stimulation through the hand, foot, and a diaphragmatic breath as often as I can, in many ways as I can. And with the bird dog, if they have a problem with it, I wouldn't regress it in the sense that I want to try to make it easier, but I would facilitate the heck out of it in one of those kinds of mechanisms that you're talking about rather. What I'll sometimes do also is I'll be on the floor next to them and I'll give them, so like they're going this way on their hands and knees, and I'll just kind of push them a little bit, like I'm going to knock them over. And just that little subtle couple pounds of pressure, suddenly they figure out how to engage so they get knocked over and they find that stability. I'm like, wow, do you feel that now? They're like, yeah, way better. Does it feel better?
That's a good point. I've never written this down and we don't have it on a PowerPoint slide, but I think we might want to add it, boys, is create a situation where they're going to smash their face into the ground. Immediate regression. I mean, the awareness is unbelievable. You know, you push them over towards their face and people get real protective. I mean, it's just their visual field is creating that sensation of like, hey, that ground's getting closer or farther. But I think that's a great one. Another little tip, as Dan was talking, I hope all of you newer clinicians that are trying to figure this out, Dan went through a bunch of them that just use his body and the patient's body. And I think one of the common reasons for that is when you don't know which exercise is going to work perfectly, you want to have the ability to offer 6 or 7 right now without having to walk away and go get a piece of equipment, come back, take that patient, hey, stand up, we're going to go over here towards the TRX, or stand up, we're going to go over here to the kettlebell. No. I'm going to push you this way, I'm going to push you that way, make a fist. Everything that we can do to regress is going to be right here on the ground right now, or wherever you are, right? Nearby. And so having that encyclopedia of options for that exercise you have is important, to have multiple things. I can't tell you how many times I've used like towels to irradiate. Sometimes if people have a like a 12-ounce, water bottle, like the ones you get out of a vending machine, have them squeeze that until you hear a crunch. I'm like, okay, I got to hear the crunch. That gripping just drives up their activation and whatnot. And it's just enough resistance. It doesn't hurt their hands, but it's kind of big and grippy. I like that. I like having them push into my hand. I like pushing them over. If there's a band next to you, that's great. I've even, I've been in tough places before, and you take off your belt and just use that as the resistance device, because like, hey man, I got it right now. We're in I've rehabbed people in hotel rooms and whatnot. And it's like, we don't have anything else, so we're going to go with that. But
I had a patient yesterday. She was in the hotel room. It was a telehealth patient, and she was in the hotel room. We had to use towel. And so, even if you're not in the same place, if it's a telehealth person, sometimes you got to do what you got to do, and you got to get creative, but you have to find a way to facilitate the movement to allow them to not hurt. And
I love it.
Facilitate gives you information. So if you're facilitating something with breath, they probably need a little more abdominal. If you're facilitating something with glutes, they probably need more of that, or their lats or whatever. So the facilitation trick you choose that works is giving you insight as to what you want to continue to work on more. Yeah. Because like, as an example, I'll have, say somebody can't do a body weight squat. Say, Mr. Satterlee, I'd like to watch you squat. Can you squat? It kind of hurts. So I don't do squats anymore. Well, let's try it. So, right off the bat, I could adjust your stance. I might do that. I could do the old thing with like, put something underneath your heels. I could do something like that. But what if I have none of those things? What if I need to try a facilitation technique like, I want you to brace because I'm going to hit you in the stomach? And they're like, ooh, that's better. Okay, well, what does that tell you, right? Or squeeze your hands, or believe you're going to spread the floor with your feet, or believe you're going to, I always tell people this, you have a string between your big toes. I want you to try to tear it, because this is transverse plane glute and this is frontal plane glute. They're different. And sometimes you'll find a difference. If I get you to squat and I tell you to spread the floor, you're like, yeah, that's better. Pain-free? No, but it's better. I'm happy to do it now. Like, no. We're going to shoot higher than that. We want pain-free. So here's another thing to pretend. And then you get them that, or you can put a band around their feet if they can't pretend. I will say that over time, if I'm working with a fitness-oriented person, I'll tell them what to do. If I've got a person that fitness is not a part of their life, they just happen to have pain, they're coming to see me, I'll use the band, because I don't trust them to know what the hell they're trying to even do. But the band will not create any ambiguity. So I'll put the band on their feet where it's trying to internally rotate them. So they have to externally rotate. How does that feel? and compare that to when it's at their knees, where that's going to be the ab and ad. And so you can get an idea, do I need to hit the glutes with this person more, or do I need to hit the abs with this person more? So that's kind of a nice way of using that information to think about other exercises downstream where you want your emphasis to be. While we're on that, Josh, I wanted to bring up something, because you had me say, you try to remember of some stories. I had a guy that illustrated the magic of a mini band better than most people I can remember anyway. He was seeing me for his elbow and his shoulder. And all he did, this is one of those guys where he's our age, or I'll say my age, because you're so young, apparently. But he's about my age, and he's still a guy that just does lots of curls and lots of shoulder press. And he would try, and it bugged his elbow and bugged his shoulder. And I was at the point where we had gotten better enough. I thought, well, let's try it again. I said, well, what's your warm-up weight? And he told me, so I grabbed that weight, and he's like, still really hurts. Well, let's put this band around your feet. Prior to this.
So I just want to illustrate this. This guy is trying to warm up for a shoulder press, and you're putting a band around his feet.
His feet.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that's different than most people think.
Yeah. And so it was really funny because it was in a PT clinic with about 3,000 square feet. There's a few other people in the room, and he had a nice loud, what the fuck? It was just really funny. But because his pain went away. And I said, we keep talking about how your core is something we have to work on here. That just demonstrated it, that your shoulder and your elbow are the innocent victims. You can't fire a cannon from a canoe, right? You fire a cannon from a battleship, and it's your nervous system that tells your body, is it battleship time or is it canoe time? And I just helped you be a canoe, or get away from being a canoe and be more of a battleship. So, I thought that was a great example of how different it can be for people if you just help them facilitate some bracing techniques or a little proximal stability.
Yeah. I'll tell you, you just reminded me of another great regression is increase the base of support. Excuse me. So you can imagine if we think we've all had people do like chops, like cable chops or band chops, and the person, their front foot is here, their back knee is here. So that would be in line. So if they can't have success there, just move that foot out. And if there's 2 feet between them, they're got a super wide base of support. I had a local police officer, I was rehabbing him for shoulder pain. I wanted to do a kettlebell press. So he's doing bottoms up kettlebell presses in the half kneeling position. So I'd regressed his posture, and then that bottoms up position, you got to irradiate like crazy to hold that sucker up. So that is 2 regressions, right? I had him here. Now, the perfect thing happened. We had another patient who was much older. And it was a woman. She was about 73, and this gentleman was probably 40, right? So she's 73, he's 40, and I had rehabbed her about 6 months earlier, and she was working out in the gym. So I asked her, hey, can you come over here? Can you kneel down in front of him, and can you demonstrate what I'm asking her to do? She gets in line and proceeds to bottoms up press a 35-pound kettlebell.
Oh, wow.
Okay? I mean, this is incredible. He's holding a 35-pound kettlebell. She proceeds to do 3 perfect reps in front of him, and I could see that she understood the gravity of the situation. You have never seen a more motivated man in your life than when he saw this woman who he perceived to be weaker than him. She's twice his age. And I'm like, yeah, she can do it. What's the problem here? Now, interestingly, every time he went in line, he failed. And so he could pull it off with a lot of effort when he had a wide base of support, but it was perfect because psychologically he now had a goal set. It didn't matter what I said. All he wanted to do was now beat this woman across from him. I was like, yeah, it was incredibly motivating for him, but it was great to see that. But again, I had regressed it. He couldn't press overhead standing. So we regressed it to half kneeling. We then regressed it to widening his base of support. And then finally we said, flip that kettlebell over, try and squeeze blood from the handle and keep the bottom up. And it did amazing. So that's the fun of regressions, right? Finding that perfect exercise for him.
I love that. Along those lines too, in half kneeling, it seems to be one of those things. I don't know why you could do it in standing, I suppose, but I always bring it out in half kneeling, is to have a band nearby and have the person with their offhand. So if I'm pressing with this hand, my offhand rows the band first to facilitate some more proximal stability. Then I press that. Now that would be, to me, in my brain, the way I think of it, if I'm rowing, I'm facilitating stability from the backside of my body. If the band is behind me and I press the band and then I press this up, I'm thinking I'm facilitating stability in the front of my body. So again, thinking, is it more one group or another? And that will oftentimes be the trigger that allows them to press comfortably, is a different facilitation technique of something like that. But again, I think if we look at regression as problem solving and not just making something smaller, because like your guy, he just lacked the stability, you widened him out and he was able to do it. Plus he got very motivated and changed his perception of what's possible.
It's so powerful when you regress those people to find that perfect entry point. And I will say that it will triple or quadruple your effectiveness in that one visit when you find that perfect exercise and entry point and then start there. I mean, you're banging your head against the wall so long, trying to find it sometimes. And then once you do, it's like, okay, I understand now. I can move forward. I mean, the patient says, I understand now, I can move forward. So
I think another thing that I like about that is, since I've been working in that fashion, it's also setting the expectation that I expect your pain to be gone with an exercise, not with my magic fingers on the table. Not that I don't have magic fingers, but if we're doing this and it hurts, I'm not going to say, oh, go back on the table. More than likely, I'm going to try all these other things. Now, if we try all these other things and we fail, we go back to the table. But that doesn't happen very often.
That is the best. When I ask people all the time, like, try and touch your toes. How's your back feel? And they're like, still hurts. Give me a number. It was a 6 out of 10. Now it's a 3 out of 10. Cool. Let's go rehab them for 5-10 minutes. And how is it now? Pain's gone. Like half and half. Sometimes it's 70-30, sometimes it's 30-70, but the mix of hands-on care and exercise is amazing, right?
Yes.
I really think somebody should kind of put together some courses where it blends like the idea of clinical skills.
Somebody should do that.
Maybe the gym thing. I don't know.
I think somebody did. Wasn't his name Josh Satterlee? Is that you?
Oh, yeah. I think that was me. Yeah. Anyways, yeah. So that's what we cover at our live events, by the way, is how many regressions do we show at the live events?
A lot.
I mean, yeah. So there's 10 buckets that we go over. There's 3 or 4 regressions in each one. So that's 30. Plus, I mean, when you did that lab on the core, how many was that? Plus we do our load placement lab. That's got to be another 8. So you're pushing 50 regressions in one of those courses.
A good library.
Yeah. Well, listen, one of the reasons we want to do this is pretty soon there might be a regressions online course hosted by Dan Swinscoe available on clinicgymhybrid.com. So keep your eyes peeled and look for announcements in the Facebook group, because we shot a course. What was that? October, September?
Maybe
August.
About right. August.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and Dan did a great job of demonstrating regressions galore with all the different buckets and postures and changes and weights and everything. And that is nearly done editing, so we are excited to get it out there. Dan, any final thoughts on regressions you want to share with the crew here?
I think that have high expectations, because pain-free is very, very often doable when you have enough trial and error options, enough regressions. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I have higher expectations, because you'll learn them eventually. Like, we're trying to share how to coalesce down all of our years of clinical experience to give it to you guys without having to be in the game so long. And just some pearls of wisdom. A lot of times it's not a better manual therapy technique. It's a better way of explaining something to somebody, so you get purposeful intent with the movement that changes how they feel that fast. And they love you because you immediately took their pain away like a ninja, just telling them what to think.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, I would say, find 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 regressions for every exercise you can name. So if you're like, I want my patients all to deadlift, right on. I agree. That is a great terminal point, great exercise. Lots of good comes from that, right? But could you name 10 regressions to deadlift? Cable pulls, pull-throughs, band pull-throughs, drop down to kneeling, sit-backs, all those things are great regressions to that. But as soon as you have an exercise, start finding regressions to it, because that's where the money will be made. That's separating the men from the boys, as they say.
Yeah. And as an example with the deadlift, when you're teaching people to hinge, it hurts people a lot, I think, just because their perception. I'll finish with this one story. There was a lady I worked with, and I thought I was knocking it out of the park with this lady. She walked in crooked. Visit 3, we're deadlifting, right? So she had come a very long way in a very short period of time. And all of a sudden, when I was showing her how to deadlift, everything about her body language changed. And I'm like, are you okay? Yeah. It doesn't hurt? No. I'm like, something looks wrong. And she just stops. She's so frustrated. She goes, everybody know deadlifting's bad for your back, Dan. And I'm like, okay, we need to sit down and talk for a minute. And so she had the perception that deadlifting was bad for her. So like she trusted me was going to do it because I had helped her so much. But at the same time, in her mind, she's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And it just showed on her body language. And so, being able to understand how to regress things and being able to confidently tell people, if you feel this in your hammies, your back is going to be fine. You're not putting any load there. Let's just round your back. See how you feel it in your back now? And now go over here. Feel it in your hammies now? And you can just immediately give them the confidence that they're willing to pick up that 35-pound kettlebell.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And there is all that, as they say, there's misinformation and disinformation out there.
Yeah.
And I think it's super prevalent in rehab. Sometimes more than even the information out there with what the CDC is dealing with right now. Like they think they got problems with misinformation and disinformation. Man, come on over to low back rehab, and like, you can't deadlift, you can never squat again. Don't my doctor said squatting is bad for you.
Very bad.
Like, I'm gonna go to the bathroom standing up. It's like, all right, you can, but your accuracy is not good.
You just reminded me of a lady I had a long time ago that had back surgery. Her surgeon, the supreme top of the food chain, told her never twist again. So I'm doing my SFMA with her, and I'm like, can you go ahead and rotate? And she's like, I can't. I said, why not? She goes, because I had surgery. I'm like, wasn't your date of surgery like years ago? She goes, yeah, but my doctor told me never to twist again. I said, okay, I think maybe that might be taken out of context, because you probably twisted to get out of your car to walk in here. You probably twist if you clean yourself after you use the toilet. I think there's a lot of twisting going on. You may not realize.
Yeah, you might even roll over in bed once in a while. I don't know. I don't know. Just lay like, what's the guy lives in Transylvania? Dracula all night, face up in a coffin. But for some of us, you might even do that in bed, or back your car out of the driveway and stuff. It's kind of important.
Crazy behaviors.
We got a guest face now. Cody has entered the chat.
The question is, Dan, can she shout?
I don't know. That was
you can't twist. You can't shout.
You got to twist and shout.
She shouted at me when I told her she'll be fine.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think we covered the subject of regressions quite well. Maybe we'll do this again. And I think our next one, we should definitely have a camera set up to demonstrate on the floor. I think that'd be good.
For sure.
Yeah. Cody, why'd you pop in, buddy?
Huh?
Why'd you pop in? We didn't get to see your smiling bearded face for the whole time.
I just wanted to, I know, helping out with kiddos, but no, I think it would be good too to kind of show for Dan to demonstrate the using basically like creating a different exercise within the exercise to create proximal stiffness for good output too. Quite often, even if we use good coaching language to try and get our patients to focus on the thing that we're trying to get them to do, if there is some type of fear avoidance there, or there's a perception that they're not strong enough to do the strength exercise, even if it's a very regressed exercise, tricking them a little bit, by creating tension and some other activity or like a form of regression, kind of pushes over the edge, and then they have that aha moment, and then care.
I am not above tricking my patients into great movement. Nope. I've used it many times.
The thing I've done for years is kind of the plug for the sandbag again. When I would teach somebody how to deadlift before I had an ultimate sandbag, I would put a kettlebell on the floor or a kettlebell on a little box. And the first word out of everybody's mouth, how much is that? Before they wanted to hear a word I had to say, they were already sizing up how much does that thing weigh. But when I hand them a sandbag, they just listen to me. They don't say a damn word. And so you immediately get the skill of being able to use the sandbag. No one seems to care what it might weigh.
I got to tell you guys a little clinical trick here. You can use this. If you have a woman or anybody come in with a purse to your clinic, one thing I always do is, so in the rooms that I treated in, they're relatively small and there's a place to put your bag. So women will set their bag down and I'll say, do you mind if I move that real quick? And I'll move it over like to a chair or back off the chair and back to the cabinet or anywhere. Because what I'm trying to do is, I love the trick of how much does this weigh versus the kettlebell.
Oh,
Because every 1 out of 4 or 5 times you find a purse that you're like, oh man, this thing's 25 pounds. And I'm going to start her with I'll start her with an 18-pound kettlebell. She'll say that's too heavy. And I'll go, all right, well, let's just start with your purse. Right. And I've done like overhead presses with purses a bunch. And then you go, Stacy, I tricked you there. Your purse is actually much heavier than this kettlebell. So let's now go easy with this hunk of cast iron. And they're like, what, really? And then they hold both like, oh, I guess you're right. Oh man. And yeah. So a little trick there. Grab their purse or if they come in with anything that they just have been carrying around, backpack or anything like that, laptop bag, briefcase. I can't tell you how many times I use that just to get that psychological win early on.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's it. Dan, Kurt, Cody, I hope you guys have a wonderful holiday season if we don't talk. And for everybody watching this, we will be sending out announcements about this regressions course with Dan Swinscoe. It's exciting. And just as a little teaser, if you stayed this long, a little Easter egg, every person on this call, this screen right now, there should be 4 boxes or 4 faces. Everybody here has a course that's going to be coming out soon on the Clinic Gym Hybrid site. So stay tuned. Yeah. Anyways, the first one out will be that Regressions with Dan Swinscoe. Dan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, guys. Nice seeing you.
Thanks, Dan.
See you.
All right.
Good job, bud.
Thanks so much for checking out these videos. I hope they're useful. We'll cover things like rehab, exercise, business model, progressions, layout, everything else that helps you build a clinic. So if you're interested, you can click here, there, here, or anywhere to get more videos just like this. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you soon.